Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We have a great show lined up for this evening. I've got Dr. Michael Brown with me today. And Michael, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Jan. Thank you.
It's pronounced Jan, but you had sent me a copy of your book, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood. Good read. I definitely recommend people reading it. You have a new version of this book coming out soon. And you published this when in the 1990s, correct?
1992, and it's been continuously in print. It's been translated into more languages than any book that I wrote. And the publisher approached me a year ago and said, "Hey, it's been in print this whole time. Why don't we do a revised, updated edition?" So we did that, worked hard on it, and it's kind of shocking, Jan, to note that a lot of the things that we talked about from the past are happening again now. And some of the things that seem like they could never again happen in Europe or never happen in America, they're happening now in terms of the rising tide of anti-Semitism. And it's as irrational as ever.
Yeah, well, and I had fallen into a lot of it. And, in January, I started a long series with Lloyd DeYoung going into all this, which you're aware of. And that was kind of over that series when you and I started speaking. And then I've also done 3 shows with Guy Todd investigating more of this stuff. And what we've found is all of this Nazism, and we just did a show last Wednesday going into all of the ties between the Nazis and Islam. And then Lloyd DeYoung and I had covered this as well. Hitler worked with the Grand Mufti and of Palestine, and then you had, I used to live in Yugoslavia back in the 90s, before you or after you wrote this, 30 years ago you wrote this thing, but in Yugoslavia, everybody was aware of the Bosnian Muslim Handjar and how they were the Waffen SS's largest division, and they would hold throat-slicing contests and things like this to see how many Orthodox Christians that they could kill in a day. I think or in an hour or something like that. I think the record was like 300. But, this stuff was standard knowledge when I lived in Serbia during the war. I was there living with my ex-wife and her family, and I would live there every summer. And pretty much what I did the whole summer was just study and help her brother with his work. But speaking of, they just show up in the chat there. But so this, I fell into a lot of the propaganda for years, and then doing this series on Islam, and of course I became a Christian in 2017 and began reading everything and realizing, hey, everything has been inverted, and white is black, black is white, up is down, etc. And then I started realizing, wow, that the whole thing was really bait and switched from Islam onto the Jews. They want people to not worry about 1.4 or 1.8 billion Muslims and focus on 16 million Jews as the bane of all of the world's problems and nothing else. And you are actually a Christian minister, and you were born Jewish. And in your book you talk about how you were a heroin junkie and on LSD and smoking weed and things like that, and you woke up to Christ one day. You want to discuss that as we get going here?
Yeah, sure. The fascinating thing these days is when the anti-Semites come out of the woodwork, and I reference that I'm a Jewish follower of Jesus, I'm told, well, no, then you can't be a follower of Jesus, that you're just this crypto Jew who's invaded the church secretly to undermine. I mean, these bizarre, wild things. Again, it's not surprising because I've documented for years. It's still a bit of a shock to the system when the most bizarre imaginable things are said about you. I have regularly now been accused of being a secret Mossad agent who
I
infiltrated
get that
church.
almost daily, and a crypto Zionist and yada,
Yeah,
yada,
yeah,
yada.
Zionist shell, of course, and all that. So anyway, what happened was I was raised in a conservative Jewish home on Long Island, born in Manhattan, raised on Long Island. And conservative Judaism is very much liberal. It's not conservative in terms of morality and ethics. It's just the name given to conserve traditions while going in a more liberal direction. So I would be kind of raised like a nominal Catholic or a nominal Presbyterian that would go to religious services a few times a year, and that was it. So as a Jew, I knew there's the others, you know, the Christian kids and the Gentile, the others, and there's our community, Jewish, but we weren't religious. So I was bar mitzvahed at 13, but it was more of a social event than a spiritual event for me, to be honest. And because I started playing drums when I was 8 years old, and remember, this is the 60s. There's an old saying, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there. So,
well,
yeah.
I'm an expert on the counterculture and exposing
Okay.
all of that too. So
Exactly. All right. So I got caught up in that whole spirit of the age. I saw Jimi Hendrix in concert when I was 13, and that was like a spiritually impacting event for me. And that's what opened up the door. I want to be like the rock stars and do what they did and play drums in a famous rock band. So I started getting high at the age of 14, discovered that I had a very high resistance to drugs, which meant I could do more drugs than others. And as a foolish teenager, that became kind of a calling card. So I got known as Drug Baron, Iron Man, and was doing LSD and speed and heroin. So even things that were unusual for the hippie type, I got into. And then at the age of 16, my two best friends, one nominal Russian Orthodox, the other nominal Methodist, they started going to a little gospel preaching church because they liked two girls who were going. The girls were going because their uncle was the pastor. Their dad had been praying for them. I went in August of 71 to pull them out because they were starting to change. And I thought that's going to break up our band. And I didn't like that. I went to pull them out and God began to deal with me. And the interesting thing is, you know, I was totally into the rock drug scene. So I saw Hendrix again. I saw Jim Morrison and the Doors, Janis Joplin, The Who perform rock operatomry, the Zeppelin numerous times, Grateful Dead, Jethro Tull numerous times, and all the big bands. And one after another, I saw them. I just lived for that. And here I am in this little church. They don't have all the amplification and equipment, you know, and all the contemporary sounds we're used to today. Just pastor's wife playing piano, these little ditty hymns. But God started dealing with me. These people started praying for me. The things I was boasting about one day, I started feeling very uncomfortable about the next day. And at the end of the year, I realized Jesus really died for me. This is real and true. Now I had a battle because I didn't want to change. I loved doing drugs and living in sin, but God's love penetrated my heart. I was radically transformed. December 17th of 71, I said, I'll never put a needle in my arm again. I was free from that night on. And then when my dad saw the change in my life, he was thrilled, but he said, Michael, we're Jews. We don't believe this. So he brought me to the local rabbi. The local rabbi befriended me and started to challenge me, you know, and who are you to teach us? And you can't even read Hebrew. And even though I was reading the Bible in English day and night, you know, I was challenged by him and other rabbis. So that led to me majoring in Hebrew in college, ultimately getting a Ph.D. in Semitic languages from New York University. But along the way, really early on in my journey, this rabbi gave me a book about anti-Semitism in church history. And it was a real shocker because the Christians in this little church, they loved me as a Jew and they seemed to love the Jewish people. We wanted everyone to know about Jesus. We said, yes, Jews need to believe in Jesus like everybody else, but they seem to have a real love for Israel. And as I've traveled around the world, I've been outside the United States about 200 trips and traveled all over the nations. I've met Christian after Christian after Christian that prays for the Jewish people, that has a real love for Israel. Doesn't mean accepting everything Israel does or defending everything Israel does, but it's the opposite of the anti-Semitism I read about in church history. But I wrote this book, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, to help other Christians know how many Jews look at Jesus, look at the church, the negative view they have, how they think there's a straight line from Jesus to the Holocaust because of what's often been done by professing Christians in Jesus' name. But the real shocker is that what I documented in the book in 92 and read about 47 years ago, I'm seeing virtually every single day, not just among left-wing Christians, but among right-wing conservative Christians, some of the old junk, the old garbage, the old lies being regurgitated today. And it's a shocker. It is a real shocker, especially now with the internet, that everybody can express their views instantly. And I'll just say this, if you remember in 2015, right after the Obergefell decision in the Supreme Court, when it redefined marriage, it empowered people to come out and say they were pro same-sex marriage, they were pro-gay. Now that the court had said it, people that were kind of on the sidelines felt emboldened to say, that's how I feel too. And you Christians are bigoted for rejecting it. Well, you have more and more prominent voices coming out with the same anti-Semitic vitriol. And with that, it's emboldened people to kind of come out of the woodwork, and they are everywhere.
Right,
I imagine right now in your chat room as well, but they are out there.
And they don't understand that it's about natural law rather than killing off your family tree, and promoting eugenics. And that's what the real agenda is. And that's the same with the, the 60s psychedelic drug rock counterculture, which I've done probably 200 shows exposing, is that was designed for the purpose that it got you caught into, was to get kids on drugs and hypersexualized to wreck their lives so that they wouldn't have families and wouldn't do anything with themselves. And so many, of the youth wipe out and die from sticking needles and things in their arms and don't get out of it like you did. But, a couple of months ago, I had sent you a paper that I've been working on as well about the Talmud, and I've been going through looking at all of these fake quotes that, are spread all over the internet. And some of them started in like 1700. A lot of them came around about 1892 or so. By this, and now I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, this defrocked Catholic priest out of Russia. And he had put a book out, and you can always tell when they're fakes because, the Talmud, and I had wanted to go in and verify these quotes for years. I just figured, well, they got citations, they must be true. But then, with Lloyd DeYoung back in January, he and I started checking some of them. And right away, we realized about 2/3 of them were either taken out of context or totally fake. But, the Talmud is a set of law books, essentially. That's primarily what they are. It's a lot of legalese. And what they'll do is they'll take one line or one sentence from the Talmud, and they'll quote that, and then they'll omit the surrounding, 10 pages of context, depending on what the case may be, and then spin this whole thing that the Talmud is the most evil book ever written, and then use that as justification for all of their hatred. So going in and reading all of this was really a big eye-opener. And then I found about 2/3 of the quotes were outright faked, completely made up. Probably 20% aren't from the Talmud. They might be from the Midrash or some other book, or some of them were even from books from the from early in the 1900s. And all of this stuff is heaped up and then claimed it's the Talmud, and then this is used as justification for why all Jews should be killed. And today anybody can go online and they can read the Talmud for themselves, and they'll say, oh, well, there's a watered down only for Goy version that, and the real Talmud is only brought out on Friday nights under a full moon, and it's kept, 100 feet or 100 stories below street level, and, they have these secret, Jewish gatherings where the real Talmud is brought out. But, what people don't get, and of course I'm being sarcastic, but what people don't understand is that 2/3 of these so-called quotes you can find in the Talmud, but they're taken out of context. And you see people doing this with the Bible often too. They'll cite one little line and take the surrounding text out of context. And so if you go in and you just read the entire passage and, what the whole thing says, you realize that all of this is a fraud, and so these guys like this defrocked Catholic priest, he did this, and you begin to notice the pattern. Once you've spent, 20, 30, 40 hours studying this stuff as a Christian, and of course, as soon as I started fact-checking all of these quotes, I was accused of being a Jewish Mossad agent, sellout, Zionist, all of this stuff by these hack moron trolls out there. You can't, never mind that Christians worship truth, and by being a Christian, I had to check this stuff and make sure, Satan is the father of all lies. I didn't want to be spreading false information. And as soon as I realized it was false, I came out and I corrected myself and said, whoa, this stuff is not true. And so then you're a sellout and all this stuff. But, the quotes, many of them are there. But as soon as you read the context, you realize that These are legal discussions. It would be like lawyers going back and forth over a whole discussion. You have, let's say, a defendant who says, we got to kill all the Gentiles. And then, lawyer 1 says this, lawyer 2 says that, lawyer 3 says that, and it goes on until it reaches a logical conclusion. But people are too lazy today to crack a book and verify if what they're spreading is true. So then, that led to reaching out to you and reading this and all of that. And I'm still going to get this paper published. It's, it's now about 100 pages, and I didn't expect it to be that. But, and then I just one more comment here about it, and then I'm going to pass it back over to you. But so as I was going through all of these quotes, 98.6% ended up being false, with one of them being true, which was the Jews should destroy the books of the Christians. Okay, whoa, let's all freak out now, everybody. Never mind, the Christians say they should destroy all the books of the Jews, right?
Actually burn the Talmudic books, right?
And burn the Talmudic books, etc. But then I had the idea, I wonder, and I had spent two and a half months verifying all of these quotes. And then I said, I wonder if I could find these quotes in the Islamic texts. And it took me 2 days to find 75% of these false accusations against the Jews, to actually find them in the Islamic texts. So that was a big eye-opener. And so you see the whole bait and switch going on there.
Yeah, and let me start with your last point. That was the most fascinating thing to me. I have 3 years of classical Arabic. I can read the Quran slowly in Arabic and have some decent background in Islamic literature, but I've not specialized in it at all. And I have friends who have, and I lean on them more and then do my research. So when I started to go through your document and found the very charges that were being brought against Judaism really found in Islam, that was a real eye-opener to me on many fronts. I was not aware of that. But to give my own intersection here, and that also connects me with what you folks are doing, I have written 5 volumes on answering Jewish objections to Jesus. There's nothing like this that's been done. It's kind of the gold standard in Jewish apologetics because it didn't exist. When people say you're the world's #1 Messianic Jewish apologist, I used to say you're #1 among one. It was just a massive need. I said it's like playing center on the pygmy basketball team. You don't have to be too tall to do it. So it had to be done. But because of that, I've gotten singled out in the Jewish community. I've been called public enemy #1 for our outreach work to Jewish people in America and increasingly in Israel as well, to the point that when my 94-year-old mom passed away a few years back in 2016, I got a call from a rabbi. She was going to be buried at a cemetery in New Jersey next to my dad. My sister's not a follower of Jesus. She wanted a Reform rabbi there to do the ceremony, liberal rabbi. So I told the cemetery, and they said, great, we'll set that up. I then get a call from the rabbi, and the rabbi wanted me to know that he had no problem doing my mother's funeral, and that the cemetery called him and said, will you have an issue? This is a liberal rabbi. Will you have an issue doing this funeral because it's the mother of Dr. Michael Brown? That's how notorious I am in terms of Jewish outreach. And yet, the moment that I set the record straight about the Talmud, I too am a sellout, not truly a follower of Jesus. Volume 5 in the series is over 300 pages, and it details why I reject the Talmud, why I am not a Talmudic Jew, why I reject Talmudic authority, why I see the Talmud going in a different direction than Scripture. 300 pages of doing that. And yet, when I say, no, but the Talmud doesn't say this, and it doesn't say this, I'm now a sellout and ignorant of it. Oh, by the way, Prime Minister Netanyahu just texted me. He said, we're doing a great job, but don't blow our cover. So we got to be really careful. Just want to let you know. Okay, but back to the Talmud. The easiest way...
Ladies and gentlemen, he's joking, by the way, for those of you who don't get that. No, you can't take that statement and edit it out of context.
We'll see what happens. Freudian slip, I'll be told. All right, so anyhow, and look, my last time in Israel, a time before last, I was arrested. some counter missionaries started harassing me. I decided I'm not going to leave if they're harassing. Next thing, I'm surrounded by ultra-Orthodox Jews. I'm preaching Jesus to them. They're spitting on the ground in anger because of who they think he is and all of this. So anyway, I mean, if people didn't take it seriously, it's utterly laughable. But you see where these things go over the years. So when you get back to the Talmud, here's what folks need to understand. The Talmud is not a book. If I was at my office, my studio office, another location, I have the Talmud, the set of the Talmud there. Now it's my house all online, but that's 20 volumes, 20 large volumes, and with the commentaries and the commentaries and the commentaries, millions and millions and millions of words, tremendously complex and difficult. And the Mishnah is the foundational document. That's 6 volumes. So there's 6 6 orders of the Mishnah divided into 63 tractates. So the tractates would be similar to like a book of the Bible, and then the orders, the larger subdivisions. That it comes out a little after 200 of this era. And then 200 to 300 years after that, what's called the Jerusalem Talmud is edited in its final form. And then the Babylonian Talmud, which is the more authoritative one, that's finished between 500 and 600. And the easy way to destroy all the lies about the Talmud is to say to someone, okay, well, the Babylonian Talmud begins with the first order, Zera'im, seeds, which is agricultural, and it only carries one tractate from that, Brachot, which deals with benedictions, prayers, things like that. So let's start on the very opening page of Brachot. The Talmud always starts on page 2 because you're joining an ongoing discussion. I guarantee you, most people will drop out within seconds. Those who persevere to within minutes will be the rare ones. Those who actually get through a few pages of the Talmud, scratching their heads is, what am I reading? What is this? The most confusing, and the law and the back and the forth and the discussion and the quoting of a scripture and then trying to tie it in with the law and on, almost endlessly. And then you'll go through all the brachot and you won't find a single statement dealing with any of these issues because these are not.
It goes off into something irrelevant and then comes back like 10 chapters later.
Right, exactly.
I must be a real exception because I've actually managed to work my way through probably 600 or 700 pages of it.
Yeah,
and,
which is,
it was like, okay, staying up late at night. And I think you told me one time the Talmud is something you read, rather than counting sheep so you can sleep at night.
Yeah, I mean, for your average person, when you're learning it in yeshiva, I didn't have that background, but I've studied many hours with rabbis and taught myself and things like that. There's a complexity and a logic and all of this, and folks really get caught up with it. And for your average Christian, take what seem to be the most boring parts of the Torah, maybe regulations about the animal sacrifices, and you take this much, and then a handful of this, mix it in, or very, very specific laws about an oath, and if you make this oath or that oath, and you kind of read those a little faster because they seem a little boring. Well, that's what the Talmud is, except in 1,000 times more detail, saying, well, study of the law, that should be our delight. Our delight should be in the law of the Lord. So it's studied literally day and night by the hour. And then from that, different laws, customs are developed. So it's really easy to take things out of context. Really, really easy to do it. Really, really easy to misunderstand. And one example that I've used for years is that, and again, I'm not here to defend the Talmud. I'm not a Talmudic Jew. I am in constant battle with the rabbinic community about who Jesus is. Constant day and night interacting in respectful way for the most part, but I have more than my share of haters who stand against me. And they'll say to me, our forefathers died rather than believe what you believe. You not only believe it, but you're spreading your lies. So I'm not defending the Talmud, but when it's lied about and when those lies provoke Jew hatred, then I'll explain it. Right. So, we're told that according to the Talmud, if a girl under 3 years old is raped, that it's nothing. And the Talmud actually says those words, it's nothing. Well, what does it mean? Well, the courts convene different days of the week. And if you were getting married and you were a virgin, there was a day of the week when virgins were married. Let's say you were getting remarried, your first husband had died, you were getting remarried. There was a day when non-virgins were married. So the question is, what would be the status of a girl who was sexually violated before she was 3 years old? Should she be considered a virgin? And the answer is yes. It would be just like if she was injured by a branch of a tree and broken.
And what they do, what these idiots do, is they will take that whole discussion out of context and say that the Talmud justifies pedophilia. No,
exactly.
The whole conversation, which I've read this over and over, the whole conversation, like you said, is about whether when the girl grows up and she is an adult and she is choosing her husband, she decides, by the way, when and if she should be married, if she should get full bride price of 200 dinars or half bride price of 100 dinars. And if she gets full bride price of 200 dinars, she is considered a virgin. So if the child is molested before 3 years and a day, she gets full bride price. If she's molested after 3 years and a day, she gets half bride price. And so this whole thing is spun against the Jews. And I mean, once you start reading it, the lies are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and I recently interacted with Reverend Ted Pike, who still believes these things. And on his website, he's saying he's got page after page after page of documentation. I say, can you read Hebrew or Aramaic? No, he doesn't need to. And by the way, it's really difficult stuff. In other words, unless you really know the literature well, it's difficult to understand. Now, some of the sources that you folks have used, more readily available, are expanded translations by ultra-Orthodox rabbis and scholars so that you can really dig deeper and find out what's being said. In other words, you don't have to be a Talmudic scholar. Anybody can use these sources and understand. But when I address this on the air, when I saw these things circulating, I noticed a comment. I don't see a lot of the comments on our YouTube page, but I noticed comments from this Lloyd fellow who was explaining exactly what the passages meant. And I said, who is this guy? Doesn't sound like a Jewish name. And he's got it exactly right. Well, and that's how I found out about you folks. We began to interact when I cited him and you reached out to me. And then I was thrilled to hear your own story and journey. But I had Ted Pike on the air, just maybe 2 months ago, and he still holds to these things. He actually wrote a book in 1984. And let me see if I can just grab this quote here. He said that when the Christians in the Middle Ages, let's see, we have unearthed irrefutable evidence that Israel is a dominant and moving force behind the present and coming evils of our day. To our amazement, we find that Israel is not that trusted, familiar friend we thought we had known. Rather, she is a misshapen facsimile of everything we had so fondly bid God speak to. We are at last confronted with a monstrous system of evil, which, if unresisted, will destroy us and our children and bring the entire world into such darkness, oppression, and satanic dominion that only the coming of Jesus Christ can make it right again. And according to Pike, the reason that medieval Christians persecuted and killed Jews is that these moral Christians were so appalled at the Jewish practice of pedophilia that they killed them. And he believes these things to this day and is an evangelical reverend. It's shocking and mind-boggling. And then you add in the latest thing, which again, where in the world is this coming from? That the other secret weapon of the Jews is the 7 laws of Noah, by which they are now going to bring the Christian world into captivity and then start beheading us.
Right, and you read the Noahide material from the Old Testament, by the way, folks. What is it? Numbers, Deuteronomy, something like that. But it's the foundation of the 10 Commandments. It's like 5 or 6 of the 10 Commandments, And it's like, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, etc. And then so what they'll do is they'll say, well, that one line about, thou shalt not have idol worship idols, they'll take that to say, well, that means that there's a grand conspiracy that they're immediately going to go out and kill all Christians.
Yeah, and again, the thing that's so interesting there, I'm fully aware of the discussion within Judaism as to whether Christianity is idolatry or not. The prevailing view through the centuries has been that for a Jew, it's idolatry. For a Gentile, it's not idolatry. There are some that hold it's idolatry for Christians as well. But the majority of those who are putting forward the Noahide laws, their presupposition is that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all agree on these basic 7 principles, which rabbinic exegesis derives from Genesis 2 and Genesis 9, and then read some things into it to get the text there. As you said, laws against idolatry, blasphemy, stealing, adultery, murder, the call to establish courts, and then a dietary law not to eat the limb of a living animal. Those are the basic Noahide laws. But the ones that are putting them forth are saying, hey, this is a great way to just put forth morality in a way that the monotheistic religions agree on. In other words, these are the ones who do not believe Christianity is idolatry. But even those who do, there's no notion that they're going to go around beheading people. Rather, their view is that when the Messiah comes, the traditional Jewish Messiah, and establishes his kingdom on the earth, that he will enforce the Torah. So he'll enforce Sabbath observance, he'll enforce these other things. As I was talking to one ultra-Orthodox rabbi, he says, no, who's talking about killing them? What are you talking about? He felt the whole thing completely baffling. I talked to another guy who has a whole organization, a Jewish friend who has a whole organization pushing the Noahide laws. And he said, what a wacky idea that Christians don't hold it. Where did that come from? But if we get back to the Talmud, sorry for the Noahide tangent, here's something to think about. You know Peter Schaeffer's book, Jesus in the Talmud, that he believes that some of the very derogatory references in the Talmud to Balaam actually refer to Jesus when it speaks.
Right,
speaks
and
Balaam.
there's and never mind that bit. What is that? And I have the document here, but that's all. That's to Numbers. What is it? Or no, Deuteronomy 23 or something like that. And that's an Old Testament false prophet. And then what they do is they make this astounding leap of logic to try to claim that it's actually talking about Jesus.
Yes, I mean, the argument is that the Jews could not freely write and speak against Jesus, whom they called Yeshu, which is then a derogatory name. So instead they use code names like Balaam or something else. Even if it was true that the Talmud said that Jesus is burning an excrement in hell right now, even if that was true, I did a Twitter survey, and I asked folks, do you believe that Muhammad is a false prophet? If you're a Christian, do you believe he's a false prophet? And if so, do you believe he's in hell now? It was like 90-something% said yes, they do. So I thought, okay, isn't that interesting? They think it's perfectly fine for them as Christians to say that Muhammad is a false prophet and he's burning in hell. But if a traditional Jew said that Jesus was a false prophet and burning in hell, then we need to burn the Talmud. It's like, why is it fair for you and not fair for someone else? I'm not defending it. If the Talmud said it, that's grievous and horrific and proves that Jews need Jesus. But the thing that's so outrageous is that Christians have no problem. Do you think Buddha's in hell? Yes. Do you think Muhammad's in hell? Yes. They've got no problem saying that. And for another religion, if they said it, that Jesus was in hell, they're completely outraged by it. But the bottom line is, the scary thing is that there's no rationality here. There's no ability to sit down and look at actual facts. And when something takes on legs, you mentioned the Talmud Unmasked by Pranitis, that's the volume you were referring to earlier. The thing gets out there. What I spotted years ago was these books attacking the Talmud were found on sites like Radio Islam. I didn't make the other connection that you did, that the false accusations against the Talmud and the Jewish people can be rightly applied to Islam and Muslims. But I did see, isn't that fascinating, that the websites that most commonly carried attacks on the Talmud were Islamic websites putting forth this false doctrine. I just didn't make the next leap.
Yeah,
that's
exactly right. And then you realize that, the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, and the Islamists use the exact same talking points. They'll start out with banking, USS Liberty, and then they just, 9/11 wasn't done by Islam because, brown people only have box cutters and they live in caves, and who does this idiotic rhetoric benefit, and then anything that Israel does is to take over the entire world. And then never mind, you've got Islamists. The Muslim Brotherhood is over 100 million strong and is the largest terrorist organization in the world. There's 16 million Jews in the world. You have 1.8 billion estimated Muslims, But Muslims, they don't have money. No, none of the money from oil, none of the money from anything. They're stupid. They can't count. Never mind that their best are sent to our universities. And they're absolutely no threat. There's all of these talk shows out there, Adam Green, Ryan Dawson, et cetera, where they promote all of this. They're apologists for Islam and defending anything that Islam does. Never mind that if you read their own texts, these things are openly discussed, what are falsely accused of the Jews. But if we present this information, we're cucks, shills, sellouts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they can't support their claims with primary citations. So then as soon as they realize that, hey, we've checked the Talmud, and I pulled it up here a second ago, when they realize that we've actually checked the Talmud and discovered all of these things as false, then you're immediately name called at with all manner of lies. If a Jew finds an object lost by a Gentile heathen, it does not have to be returned to him. And then, what I had to do was to prove these knuckleheads wrong was actually cite every single paragraph in the Talmud for people to click on and read for themselves, because there were so many lies going on about it. And then, what I did is I started going through and comparing each single line directly to the Islamic text. And like I said, it took me 2 days to verify 75% of them is Islam. And I spent over, 2.5 months just working on these fake, Talmud, or taken out a quote, or taken out of context so-called quotes. It gets to the level of absurd. Do you mind if I ask you about E. Michael Jones and that whole fiasco?
No, please, let's do it.
All right. Well, a couple people have brought him up in the chat today, and of course, you had him on and you sent me the conversation. I've had E. Michael Jones on my show 3 or 4 times over the years, and he comes across at first as a good, Logos-believing Christian, but then, he starts going through all of the same talking points that the Islamists do, and the Jews are the crux of all evil and yada, yada, yada. But what happened between you two, and what was the breakdown of that? Apparently he's accusing you of falsely editing the show to make him, say things that he didn't actually say and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, maybe beyond remarkable. So I had known of his work many years ago on the culture wars, Dionysius Rising, one of his books, I believe that's the title. And I had read him and enjoyed what I had read, and his strong moral stance and things like that. A few things maybe went further than I would have gone, but I enjoyed it. So I got his book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, was intrigued by the title. It's, big fat book. And he's a scholarly guy. He's done a lot of research and all of that. And as I began to read it, I was like, okay, interesting. I think, wait a second, what? This is the standard anti-Semitic libel about this. I was in a state of shock. Then someone sent me clips from conservative comedian Owen Benjamin and some of his rants that really you have to categorize as anti-Semitic. I just wrote an article. It's on my website, askdrbrown.org. It's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. It's to criticize Israel fairly, to criticize the Jewish people fairly. It's not anti-Semitic. To say Jews have a disproportionate influence in American society, that's not anti-Semitic. To say, boy, American Jews seem so liberal and often on the wrong side of moral cultural issues, that's not anti-Semitic. When you demonize the people as a whole, when you mischaracterize, when you falsely spread rumors about a people, then that's being anti-Semitic. So anyway, that led me to E. Michael Jones, because folks said, yeah, he's been influencing Owen Benjamin as well. So we reached out to him. He immediately said, yes, by all means, he would come on my show. And I said, look, here's the deal. Let us be totally candid with each other. I'm going to tell my listeners and viewers, we're going to be totally candid. And if we make them uncomfortable, that's okay. But we're going to be totally candid with each other in our differences. He said, great, let's do it. So I asked him at the outset to define anti-Semitism. He defined it as racial only. He gave the origins of the word in the mid-1800s and said it's racial only, but today you're an anti-Semite if you criticize anything about the Jews, etc. And then he gave his overall position, and I immediately, the very first interchange, said that to me is an anti-Semitic viewpoint. I said it very graciously because we were going to have a conversation. That to me is an anti-Semitic position. And I came back to it later on in the show and reemphasized that his views, as he was putting them forth, that based on his quotation of 1 Thessalonians 2 and his understanding of Paul's words, that the Jews killed Christ, the Jews are displeasing to God, the Jews are hostile to all mankind, and he does not have to nuance that in any way. I said that to me is an anti-Semitic position.
And how many Jews were at Christ's execution? So wouldn't that, couple of hundred be the guilty party, not all Jews?
Well, what about the Jews followed Christ because all of his followers were Jews? Is that a true statement?
Yeah.
The Jews followed Christ. So
yeah, and they don't even get that as well. It's like.
Right. So I was trying to explain how Paul's words in 1 Thessalonians 2 should be better understood based on other scholars, including Catholic scholars, which he rejected outright. Okay. In any event, the interview ended. He thanked me for it. He said, it's good that we're having the discussion. At least we start. So I felt good that we had the discussion. I didn't debate him. I was not trying to refute him. I was having friendly interaction. If I was in a debate mode, it would have been very different, but that was not the purpose of it. It was candid, civil interaction. Afterwards, he thanked me for it. We emailed each other. Everything was great. Okay. And I thought, all right, there it is. Now, the next thing, as soon as we posted the video, his supporters started swarming in. And of course, because I'm not Catholic, because I'm evangelical, I'm not Catholic, I'm not a Christian. Because I say I'm a Jewish follower of Jesus, I'm doubly not a Christian. But then all of the litany of lies, it just came flooding in.
Doesn't half, three-quarters, most of the New Testament deal with converting Jews to Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little anachronistic to say it like that, but the foundational message is that Jesus came for the Jewish people first and foremost. That if Jesus is not for the Jews, he's not for anybody. So in any case, he then posted the video on his page, which was perfectly fine. I'm glad he did, and it was like 2,000 likes to 2 dislikes. I mean, everybody was totally, Dr. Jones, you're amazing, you're brilliant, and you expose this Jew's lies and all of this. So subsequently, I had said to him during the show that your type of rhetoric, Dr. Jones, it has led to violence against Jews in the past. If you don't nuance what you're saying, that these things lead to violence. After the synagogue shooting in California, where it almost sounded as if the guy was quoting the position of Dr. Jones and his like, I brought it up and I said, look, the shooter is guilty, not Dr. Jones, not anybody else. The shooter alone is guilty. And he's Presbyterian, not Catholic anyway. I said, he's guilty, but this is the very thing I've been warning about, that this type of rhetoric leads people to commit these atrocities. And I said, here's where I gave the warning. So I give the warning, and we play a clip of the video. And I'm talking, and on the split screen, there's Dr. Jones, right? And then we end the video at the end of my warning. And then I said, and he, when I appealed to him to nuance what he was saying, his view is basically thanks, but no thanks. I wanted to say what he said in response, but the whole thing, I played different clips of me. This one just happened to have him sitting there. So next thing, he's on all these videos and back with Owen Benjamin. Yeah, and Brown, he edited the video as if I had nothing to say. And Brown did this, and he calls me an anti-Semite after the show. I thought, Dr. Jones, number one, the video of our interview is right there on our website. It's unedited. I've never edited it. We don't do it. There it is. Watch it. Thousands have watched it, and more thousands have watched it on your page. There it is. That's number one. Number two, I wasn't editing out what you said. I was playing a clip of what I said. You happen to be on the screen, but I play, and just out of deference, to be polite, I wanted everyone to know that he refused my offer to nuance what he was saying. He rejected my suggestion. So I emailed him, and he came right back. You edited that video. You made it look like I had nothing to say. I said, Dr. Jones, that's not the case. He said, well, you need to retract your position that I'm anti-Semitic. I said, Dr. Jones, I believe your position is. Why don't we do a debate? That was why don't you and I do a debate as to whether your position is anti-Semitic or not? And that's where it's ended. But I'm almost every day. Here, someone tweets me the other day. Let me just find it. I mean, because this is now the latest internet myth. I had tweeted about a bill, a resolution in California. I was taking issue with it. And somebody tweets, isn't this the Jewish, quote, Christian, so not really Christian, who wants to put mainstream Christians in jail for believing that the church is Israel today? So I'll tell you where that lie comes from. And then I responded. And then someone else writes back, oh, you're the guy that edited the Michael Jones video and didn't have the guts to call him an anti-Semite. It's like, what are you? So,
oh, yeah. And they never mind that Satan is the father of all lies. They just stack him high, don't they?
right. And this idea that, quote, I want to put mainstream Christians in jail for believing that the church is Israel today. There are some members of Congress who want to make certain forms of speech or standing against Israel illegal, to make it illegal to be part of the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions against Israel, or that say that anti-Semitic speech would be a crime. I've never stood for that. I've never opted for that, for making it illegal to, there's freedom of speech in our country. Obviously, I've never made a statement having anything to do with that. But now, because somebody said it, somehow I support it. And if you have a different theology than I do, I want you to go to jail. So, I mean, sometimes just for the sake of truth and to make things into teachable moments, I respond. I actually did a video where I quote Owen Benjamin, I quote Michael Jones, because the two of them did a video bashing me. And I said, here, let's set the record straight, point for point for point for point. So you know what that proves? I'm lying. Because they say I said 2 + 2 = 11, and I show the video. No, here's where I said 2 + 2 = 4. That proves you're a lying Jew and can't be trusted. And the scary it's not a problem for me. I mean, I get lied about 24/7. I take it as a compliment that I'm on the right path and that we're making a difference. But the scary thing is, this is the type of stuff that gets spread about a people that opens the door to atrocities.
Absolutely. Studying this Talmud stuff and going through your book. Now, I recommend the audience who spews all of the same neo-Nazi Islamic talking points, that they read your book, because you do go through and tackle many of those points. And I'm sure your 29 years or 27 years updated version will have even more of the stuff in it.
Sir.
But it's like, once you realize, okay, they'll use the same talking points and they'll say, okay, banking or usury or, like I said, USS Liberty or whatever. You address banking in here. And never mind that the Bible says that, the Jews are only supposed to charge usury to their enemies. So, that should be a point that ought to cue people in right there. It's like, well, maybe you should stop spreading false lies about them, and, because if you're an enemy, what does that say? But also usury today, I mean, money is free and people, they sign on the dotted line and then they say, well, they're evil for loaning me money when I took out my credit card to that car loan or whatever that I put my name on it. So it's their fault for me doing it, even though I signed the thing. And then never mind that interest rates in these things are lower than they've ever been. And if you pay the money off at a certain time frame, you get the loan for free. So, they're basically giving out free money, but it's not just Jews who are bankers, and people will say, oh, well, Islam is pure because, and they'll ignore all the references to pedophilia, to murder, to slavery, etc. And they'll say, well, Islam is pure because they don't allow usury,
Well, the thing that's remarkable, through much of Jewish history, Jews have been anything but in dominance in terms of leading the societies. They've often been persecuted and kicked out of countries and things like that. And, just for example, if someone watches Fiddler on the Roof and sees the poverty, sees the pogroms, that's been the way the Jews have lived through history. One reason that many Jews got into banking is because they were forbidden from having other jobs. Martin Luther's counsel to the German princes in his mini book that concerning the Jews and their lies was to deprive Jews of good jobs. The sectors of the Catholic Church had previously done that at times. Well, one of the things that Jews could do was bank, and they became very strong in the banking industry. And what I look at is that Jews have been called by God to have a world-changing impact. and we either get it right or we get it wrong. In other words, we have a disproportionate influence for our population. So you have the Jews like Paul and Peter. You have the ancient Israelites like Moses and Isaiah. Jesus himself being a Jew. So the Jewish influence on the world for good is like no other people on the planet. And then you have Jews like Karl Marx, or
who get 60 million people killed.
Right.
But he's, he's technically an atheist. I mean, he was a Judean. Could you really,
yes.
Call him a Jew? Or he may have even been a Gomerite. But,
Well, no, here's the thing. He came from a line of rabbis, but when Jews, and this is what I was trying to tell Dr. Jones, when Jews have a negative impact on society, be it a George Soros, be it a Howard Stern.
And he's a crypto Islamist, and he worked with the Nazis, admittedly.
So when you look at Jews having a negative societal influence, it's actually when they get away from the Talmud, when they get away from the law. Otherwise, they kind of live in their own communities and seek to live by their laws, and everyone thinks they're weird and stuff like that. But the main thing is, let us alone and let us live our lives, as opposed to world domination. But in my new edition of Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, I have the most crazy, bizarre quotes. Evangelical author Tex Mars, for example, not only did he reprint the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, not only did he reprint Luther's Concerning the Jews and Their Lies, but he's got several books against the evil Talmud and Kabbalah, and saying that's what's in the Kabbalah, in the Talmud, that the Jews are going to take over the entire world and kill everybody else. I mean, it's crazy.
And meanwhile, you don't even have to hunt for it in the Islamic texts. It's out in the open in the Quran and Hadith and Sharia law, etc. But they want us to think that the secret quotes in the Talmud are the most evil. Now, what do you say about, like the porn industry and this is another one. Oh, well, the Jews are responsible for all porn.
Yeah, well, obviously, if you go back to the father of the sexual revolution, that's Alfred Kinsey.
Right.
And Alfred Kinsey
was a pedophile.
Right. He was the definition of a pervert. I mean, that's who he was. But he was raised in a strict Christian home and rebelled against his strict Christianity. That's part of why he did what he did. He is certainly the father of the sexual revolution. And if there's a second father of the sexual revolution, it's Hugh Hefner, who also rebelled against the strict Christian upbringing. Neither of these men are Jews. Now, are there a number of Jews that have been key leaders in the porn industry? Yeah, there have. Again, it's a simple principle that when Jews, obviously, if a Jew follows Jesus, that's wonderful. Praise God. That's the best, and we rejoice. But when Jews live a traditional Jewish life, they tend to have lower crime rates. They tend to have lower divorce rates. They tend to have lower rates of sexually transmitted diseases, drug abuse in their communities, much, much less than other parts of the society. And they are, if they're using porn, it's secret like anybody else. In other words, these are not the ones who are driving it.
They're not the Torah worshiping Jews that would do that stuff in the first place.
Exactly.
They're not following the law. It's not Judaism. They're atheists.
Exactly.
They're Sabbateans, etc.
When they break away from traditional Judaism, and again, I am not a traditional Jew. I preach to traditional Jews that they need to follow Jesus. But when the Jews who have the negative influence, be it the Karl Marxes, be it the Al Goldsteins in porn, I think that was one of the guys, be it George Soros, it's when they break away from traditional Judaism and break away from Talmudic teaching and Torah teaching. Otherwise, they wouldn't be touching any of these things. Yeah. So again, there are Larry Flint, right? Another key guy in porn. Was he Jewish? No. So Larry Flint, Hugh Hefner, Alfred Kinsey. So some of the fathers and the father of the sexual revolution, none of them Jews. So have Jews had an influence in porn and may have some control in porn today? Yeah, but what does that have to do with the thesis that say True News, Rick Wiles puts out on True News, again, another evangelical Christian, saying that the sexual revolution was a Zionist act, it was a Zionist propaganda and Zionist driven sexual revolution. This is madness. It is absolute madness. Oh, and by the way, True News, just go through it, whether it's the USS Liberty, whether it's one of the recent ones, ISIS didn't really exist. This is all Israel. The standard lies, there they are being regurgitated.
The chat is going crazy with the typical lies. And of course, Islam has always got to be portrayed as the poor victim. They're never responsible for any of their own behavior. The Jews or the Catholics or somebody invented Islam and made all of the Middle Easterners that way. It's always somebody else's responsibility. Let's see. Somebody else just said, what are they saying? Oh, Muslims accept Christ, though. No, they don't accept Christ. They have a system called abrogation, where they'll say something nice in the beginning of the Quran and then refute it afterward. But they actually say that all kafir or non-Muslims should be killed. And,
well, yeah, I mean, bottom line here's the deal. Muslims believe that Jesus was a prophet and they profess him as Messiah, but they do not believe he died on the cross. They do not believe he rose from the dead. They do not believe he's the Son of God. And they do not believe in the Trinity. So they do not believe in the Jesus of the New Testament. They believe in a different version.
It's a Gnostic Christ, actually.
Yeah, and doesn't really even have a personhood to him. It would be like saying, yeah, I think Jan is a great guy, and Jan is actually a black man from Switzerland. If I create a different person, what does it matter?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and when you go in and you actually study the Islamic texts, and I don't read and write Hebrew or Arabic like you, but just reading them in English, it's mind-blowing. As you saw my document, putting all this stuff together and putting it line by line where people can find these exact quotes, it's startling what Islam really believes. And then, spending 2.5 months digging through the Talmud, trying to find the evilness in it that makes it the most evil book or series of books ever written, and not being able to find anything. It's like, okay, so then if these things are not in Judaism, why are Islamists pretending that they are? And why does Islam have 75% of these ideas in their own texts? And then the next question comes up, why are they deflecting it onto the Jews, and why do they openly claim that all Jews should be killed? And so,
yeah, I mean, look, here's something interesting. You mentioned the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem
right.
previously, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, that was a confidant of Hitler, and
a general for Hitler too.
Yeah, if there's a fascinating book, Icon of Evil, which is a full-length study of Hajj Amin al-Husseini, a good, solid academic study that's been done, but Hitler and the Nazi propagandists understood that there were centuries of Islamic anti-Semitism. Now, I understand there are peace-loving Muslims. I understand there are Muslims who say that we're misinterpreting the text, but there is
come on. I've read it. Those are actually the bad Muslims. They would be considered kafir themselves.
Right. They'd be considered liberal, right, in denying the authority of the text, etc. But the fact of the matter is, Hitler and the Nazi propagandists understood that there was a history of Islamic anti-Semitism. So it was back maybe in 2012, if my memory serves me right, that the current Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was giving a speech for the Palestinian Authority and quoted the famous hadith that the resurrection, the end of the age, will not come until the Jews are destroyed. And that the famous text says that a Jew will be hiding behind a tree, and the tree will say, "There's a Jew behind me, kill him." And I was waiting for people of conscience, Muslims of conscience, Palestinian Christians of conscience, to get up publicly and refute this and say, we denounce these comments, and this is not who we are, and this is not our spirit, and this is not what we believe. But it didn't happen. And again, you have to understand, yeah, I fully recognize, I spent time with Palestinian Christians in particular, that they don't want to kill Jews. I understand that. And you have more secular Muslims just want to live in peace. But the big problem for Palestinians is radical Islam. The big problem for Palestinians is that the Jews are demonized. Hamas wants to destroy the Jewish people living in Israel. That remains a goal. During some of the protests months back, they said last year, we'll tear your heart out and eat it. There is that level of anger and vitriol, and they can find support in their traditional texts for it. Whereas you have to ask this question. I'm fully aware that the first persecutions in the New Testament were Jews who did not believe in Jesus persecuting Jews who did. So that's what Saul of Tarsus, Paul, was doing. We have that through the book of Acts. I know in early church history that you have instances of the Jewish community standing with the Romans or others and stirring up persecution against Christians. Today in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox Jews really oppose the spread of the gospel in their country. They look at people like me as enemies. I understand that. I'm not whitewashing that.
And a lot of Jews are converting to Christianity now. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. I mean, there's always a steady stream of Jews coming to faith in Jesus, maybe 400,000 in the world today. Still, that's a fraction of the overall population. And within Israel, maybe about 30,000. So with 6 million Jews in Israel, what that's 1/2 of 1%, something like that. It's still a minority. But yes, on a regular basis, it's always been through history, but an increase in recent years of Jews coming to faith in Jesus. So I'm not whitewashing Judaism. I'm not whitewashing Israel. I understand the issues. I'm simply refuting lies about the Jewish people, just as you are. Look, if somebody lied about Islam and the lies were costing Muslims their lives, I would say this is a lie. If someone was lying about gay activists and those lies were costing the gay activists their lives, I would speak out against those lies. But
well,
somehow,
isn't standing in truth what Christians are supposed to do?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that's the issue. You know, you can see someone's loyalty sometimes. Like Solomon did a test to see when two women claimed that a living baby was theirs and the dead baby was the other person's. He said, all right, let's bring the living baby up here. We'll cut it in two and we'll give half to each. Well, the mother, whose baby it really was, said, no, give her the baby. And Solomon said, okay, you're obviously the mother. What strikes me here is when people have to decide between believing lies about the Talmud or welcoming someone as a brother in Jesus who is an Orthodox believer, they will choose believing lies about the Talmud. When they have to choose between a New Testament ethic and believing lies about the Jews, they'll believe the lies about the Jews. And it's remarkable. And almost every day on the radio, I say, hey, call me. If you're a critic, call me. Let's talk.
Here's some of the mindless drivel we have to deal with. John Brisson says, Jan, when did you receive your Council for National Policy card in the mail for having this CNP neocon on?
All right, that's a new one for me. So I'm a CNP neocon.
Well, you know, and here's the thing is these people, not even grasping that Satan is the father of all lies, will spew such retarded nonsense to justify their poor thinking and the nonsense they believe because they don't have the intellectual capacity to fact check and study things for themselves, you know. So, you know, you are a neocon, whatever, I mean, I haven't been called a Jewish Zionist Mossad agent sellout for like, somebody did it right before the show, but for like, an hour now.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, John that just posted this, how am I a neocon? If you could first define that, I don't even know the CNP thing, but how am I a neocon? I'm just curious to know what I've said tonight, all right? When I'm a strong moral conservative, I've written many books with moral conservative viewpoints, get blasted. I'm on the SPLC's hate list and on the Human Rights Campaign hate list and Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. I'm on their hate list. So what have I done to be a neocon? That's what I'm curious about. When you actually ask for facts and information.
Now he's going to double down in his stupidity. Brown is a member of the CNP and author at CNP Town Hall. See, these.
What's okay? So what is CNP?
It's apparently. Wait, he set it up above. It's Council for National Policy. I mean, it's just dumb stuff. Let's move on. It's just stupid trolls.
Okay, so hang on.
One of the mods, please ban the stupid.
Is an umbrella organization and networking group for social conservative activists in the United States. I never heard of it, so I'm a member of it. Cool.
And apparently, I got a card in the mail.
Sweet. And by the way, yeah, I write articles. My articles appear all over the internet, including Town Hall, which is a conservative site. But anyway, fascinating.
Here's a point that you also deal with in your book here. So Jews are bad because they were kicked out of 109 countries.
Yep. So first thing, the 109, the fact that everybody uses the same country the same number tells you they all got it from the same bogus source. All right. So, I mean, just 109 is an exaggerated number. But is it true, for example, in 1492, that the Jews were kicked out of Spain? Yes. Had they been kicked out of other countries? Yes. Why? Because of Christian or Islamic persecution. For example, all non-baptized Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492. You know what this would be like? A black kid is shipped to 100 different white supremacist schools and is kicked out of every one of them for being black, which proves blacks are evil, which proves there's something wrong with blacks. And most of the folks that posted say, we want 110 next. We want America to be next to kick out these dirty Jews. So the fact that Jews have been persecuted for refusing to convert to Christianity or Islam
is evidence of the evil, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a cart before the horse fallacy. You know, and it's not to say that Jews are innocent of any wrongdoing forever and ever, amen. That's not what we're saying. But, you know, what we're saying is that, you know, the stuff that spread from the Talmud, you know, like we already quoted, you know, we already discussed the porn industry, banking, etc. And in fact, I think, you know, do you know, have you researched the USS Liberty? I know somebody in the chat has for me, but have you ever researched that?
Only a little bit. I've read some of it. And by the way, if Israel was guilty of something, of a crime, and it hurt America, if Jewish people were guilty, so be it. In other words, I'm the last one to hold my own people guiltless. But from everything I could find about it, I didn't do serious research on it. But again, the exaggerated charges to demonize Israel. I'd love to know what you discovered, though.
Well, somebody in the chat here had sent me a note a couple of months ago. They were looking into it for me, and they had found that apparently Lyndon Johnson and Israel were doing a false flag together to be able to drag us into a war against Egypt.
Right.
So, you know, and so, you know, the USS Liberty is then, you know, touted around as another excuse for how evil the Jews are now. You know, and like I said, I bought into all of this stuff before, but you do have to go into more depth. So what about Bolshevism and the murder of who knows, God knows how many millions of Russians were killed from Bolshevism? Do you care to address that?
Yeah, sure. All right. So who suffered terribly under communism? The Jewish people. Who was oppressed?
And, well, both, and Christians as well.
Yeah. Of course. Totally. Absolutely. But it was illegal to practice Judaism in Russia. It's a large reason that so many Russian Jews ended up becoming atheists. But religious Jews were persecuted. Religious Jews were targeted. Stalin had a special hatred for the Jewish people. So as communism developed, it developed as anything but Jew-friendly. Were there certain ideological people at the base of communism that were secular Jews? Absolutely, like the Karl Marxists and things like that.
What about Tolstoy?
In terms of his own background?
Yeah, wasn't he Jewish? I could be wrong, but...
Yeah, I mean, and you had certain people, be it Lenin or that had some Jewish blood. So again, it's the exact same principle we've been talking about, that Jews, because of gifting and calling, can have a disproportionate influence for good or bad, but they don't control the world. If they controlled the world, they wouldn't have been slaughtered 6 million out of 9 million Jews under the Nazis. You wouldn't have had 3 out of 3.3 million Jews, so 9 out of 10 slaughtered in Poland under the Nazis. You wouldn't have had the massive slaughter of Jews under the communists. You wouldn't have the ongoing Islamic attack, radical Islamic attack on Jews to this day. So I have no debate with those who say that here on the Supreme Court, we have 3 Jews, right? So that's 33% of the Supreme Court at the moment is Jewish. And what the Jewish population of America is, what, 10 times representative, 10 times as much there. And all 3 are very liberal, right? So what does it prove? That all Jews do Jews control the Supreme Court?
And never mind, they swear on the Bible, you know, and then they're liberal.
But here's the other thing, though. Through American history, how many Jews have been on the Supreme Court? Very, very few. Through American history, how much influence have Jews had on our educational system? Until recently, it's been relatively minor. In fact, Jewish people were cut out from anything. So the point is, we can have influence. And when we get away from the Bible, our influence can often be a negative influence, a worldly influence, a secular influence. I have no argument with that. But because we don't control stuff, because we don't run it, we end up getting killed. We end up getting slaughtered. Look,
and your book discusses that thoroughly.
yeah, and look at the UN. The UN is perpetually condemning Israel. The same UN that doesn't condemn China for Tiananmen Square and didn't condemn
or all the Islam stuff at that.
Yeah, Saddam Hussein, when he tear gassed the Kurds and killed them thousands, and atrocities one after the other. And how much does it condemn the horrible war in Syria, which is Muslims killing Muslims for the most part, and Christians stuck in the middle of it being slaughtered? It doesn't say anything about that, but consistently condemns Israel to the point that Nikki Haley had to call him out. If the Jews are all powerful, why aren't they running this? Why, if the Jews are so powerful, why were they kicked out of all these different countries?
Well, that's a good point. Now, the Dashing Rogue and somebody else has a good point here. USS Liberty was attacked for rebroadcasting the UN radio broadcast that aided the Egyptians during the war against the Israeli-Egyptian war. And then Vinny says Tolstoy became a Christian later in life after he mass murdered, like, 20,000 or 20 million people. And then Joe says Tolstoy was an intellectual liberal in the vein of Marx, but I'm not sure he was Jewish. So thanks for the corrections on those folks. And let's see. Poor Jews created communism, killed millions of Christians. That's what free speech says. So, it wasn't that Tolstoy, Stalin, and these people weren't, giving the orders behind all that. It was the poor Jews. Now, what do you have to say about that comment?
All right. Okay. So number one, Jews were some of the people. Was Friedrich Engels a Jew, for example? Jews were some of the ideological formers of communism. Others were Gentiles. They ended up not leading the system, not controlling the system. They ended up being victims of the system. But again, they did it as secularists. They show me where Karl Marx is quoting Torah and Talmud in terms of his foundation. These men did what they did as atheists. And
he was strictly against God. I mean, that's the foundation of communism, is it's an atheist ideology.
Right. So
ideology.
Right. So you could either say that Jews by nature are evil and therefore doing these horrific things, or you could say when Jews reject the foundation of God and Torah, then because of their exceptional gifting or abilities or whatever, they can do a lot of harm. Again, I have no argument with that whatsoever, but then you have to flip things around and you have to ask about the profound moral influence that's come to the world through Jewish people.
Okay, and that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up, Michael, because, and you said the Torah, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's the Old Testament. And when you understand that this is the foundation of Western law, and what all things we hold as a higher social system, and then when you get all of this anti-Semitism stuff and all the people that want to kill all of the Jews, what they want to do is get rid of the biblical foundation of law, and then so you have the neo-Nazis, which Todd and I showed last week are Islamists at the top through the Thule Society and Baron von Sabatendorf, and you've got all of the Nazis or all of the Islamists within the Nazi Party, and you have them all using the same talking points. Well, that points to me that they want to get rid of the Old Testament because they want to bring in Sharia law. So then you have to think a little more critically and say, well, is getting rid of Jews and the belief in the Old Testament, et cetera, a really good idea? All of you who spread all of the the hate speech, and so are you trying to bring in Sharia law and trying to create another genocide? And to me, that's what it appears that they are doing, because the neo-Nazis and the Islamists always use the exact same talking points.
And let me say one other thing. And I get into this in Our Hands Are Stained with Blood. If folks order the new edition, which comes out in September, because it's expanded and with a lot of
this one's small, material. So it's going to be a bigger book.
Yeah, it'll be bigger. What I did also, that one has a a bibliographical supplement in the back. We pulled that out and we're putting it online entirely. So that gives us a lot more room for documentation in the book. There it is, signed. You got it. That gives us more room for documentation in the book and for updating and expanding. But what becomes interesting is when you see that, for example, both white supremacists and black supremacists hate the Jews. That's interesting. And then you find that the Jews actually control the Vatican, and the Jews actually control Freemasonry. And you think, wait a second. Well, people actually believe this. I've done lectures, outreach lectures years back at Yale University, Columbia University. And I said, let's look at the phenomenon of anti-Semitism worldwide, what Jews are blamed for. And we go from the world of Islam to the world of atheistic communism. We go from Christian history, where Jews get bashed and maligned, to contemporary Japan. And we go from white supremacists to black supremacists. We look at some of the lies. We look at some of the things that have been repeated or are still believed to this day, one after another, after another, after another, after another. And then I say, okay, let's try to connect the dots. Well, it's economic because Jews control the money. And we show, okay, that doesn't work here. Well, it's because Christianity, Christians were anti-Semitic. Well, then we show how that doesn't work. And then, well, Islam, okay, but how does that affect atheists? And when you ultimately connect the dots, it's clear there's not a rational explanation for it. That ultimately, I look at a demonic conspiracy. You mentioned Satan's the father of lies as behind this. And I've done these lectures, Yale, Columbia, with faculty there, with students there, grads, and taking questions up to 2 hours. And no one can refute what I'm saying, that ultimately it's the father of lies behind these things. Again, it doesn't mean that Jews cannot be criticized. It doesn't mean that Israel doesn't do things wrong. It doesn't mean that we whitewash Jewish leaders.
You mean are they human too? Or is that what you're getting at?
Oh, well, you're really stretching it there to humanize Jews. But that's the issue.
Well, because we have to dehumanize certain groups to be able to, spread all of this stuff and take things strictly out of context. Now, Truth Bites is saying over 33% of Jews own slaves. Now, as we showed in the series on Islam, Islam was the foundation of slavery. They're still running the slave trade today, the black slave trade. In Islamic texts, you can find discussions of slavery throughout, whereas in Jewish texts you cannot. So, are they... whom are you speaking of? Are they atheists? Are they Sabbateans who are crypto-Islamists, etc.? You have to be more clear on who you're discussing.
There was a book put out by Louis Farrakhan's organization years ago, claiming that the Jews were primarily responsible or largely responsible for the horrific African slave trade. And then I believe it was either the Simon Wiesenthal Center or the ADL put out a complete massive refutation of that. But here's what's interesting. Jews have been scattered around the world, and Jews have been oppressed and beaten down, but Jews have not been the ones owning slaves. They've been the ones driven out of countries. And let's look at Israel today. Is there slavery in Israel? Here's a sovereign Jewish nation. Right. All right. You've got religious Jews and secular Jews there.
What about Libya right now? They still have open slave trade markets, thanks to the Democrats and people like what's her name, Hillary Clinton.
Well, look, countries like Saudi Arabia still have slavery. There's not a dispute on that. But does Israel practice slavery? No, it doesn't.
Well, Peru only got rid of slavery in the 1960s. They don't talk about that one.
Right. And here's the other thing. To the best of my knowledge, it is utterly false that there was a disproportionate number of Jews who owned slaves in America. But here, if 33% of American Jews own slaves, if that's true, then they were better than a lot of the rest of America, or just like much of America. I mean, what is that? Over 33% of Jews own slaves. Over 33% of Americans own slaves. And in other words,
well, what about the high number of blacks who own slaves? What about the Irish slaves? Well, that's the
origin of the trade in Africa was blacks enslaving blacks.
Right. And what about the Irish slaves and all of the European slaves? And those are totally omitted from the discussion altogether. You don't talk about that.
Right. But in any case, by the way, when I say 33% of America owned slaves, I'm not talking about every individual. I'm talking about when you had the Civil War, you were fairly evenly divided between those that were slave holders and back that, and those that were against it. But bottom line, even if you had Jews who were slave owners, here, Jews are like everybody else
Here,
with good
check it
qualities
out.
and bad qualities.
Steve Moss just nailed it. In other words, there have been atrocities from all kinds of groups. Exactly. Yes. Yay, Steve gets it. Good job, man.
Oh, listen, we just figured out something, though, Jeffrey. Mount Zion is in Kenya, the source of the Nile and the home of the real Hebrews. So we solved all those problems right there. By the way, I did, while we were chatting, I did post a link that folks will find in the chat on the USS Liberty. It's on a Jewish Myths and Facts website with details, information, and then a list of the various investigations that have been done by U.S. Navy Court of Inquiry. What is it, like 15 different investigations that have been done on this. So folks can check it out. But listen, if Israel does something wrong, you know what happens within Israel? There are protests. There are protests taking place right now in Israel in the Ethiopian Jewish community because an Ethiopian teenager was shot. The Israelis claim that the soldier, the officer's life was threatened, but he shot at the ground just to warn, and the bullet ricocheted and killed the guy. Others say, no, he shot this guy in cold blood. There are protests in the street over this because that's what the Israelis do. When they think there's injustice, they have national uproars. Do you know there have been major protests in Israel? Hundreds of thousands of people showing up when they believe that Israel was responsible for allowing a massacre of Palestinians. That hundreds of thousands of Israelis protested over that because they have a sense of justice, even though the nation needs the Lord and has all kinds of issues and problems. The fact is, the whole world looks at Israel and expects Israel to operate at a different standard than the surrounding nations. I wonder why. If the Jews are more evil than everybody, why does everyone expect them to act better than everybody? It's fascinating.
Yeah, and we already addressed this. FX2Pi says, Jews rejected and killed Jesus Christ. But per Dr. Brown, oh no, it's the Jews rejected Christ but did not kill him. We already addressed that. There was, a couple few hundred Jews that were in the crowd. Not all Jews were even there, but you have to use a little more critical thinking than that. And Jesus even asked God to forgive the Jews for that. So why are you bringing it up 2,000 years later?
Jesus said salvation is from the Jews in John 4:22. Paul said in Romans 11, verses 28 and 29, that even though the Jews are enemies on your account for the gospel, they are loved by God on account of the patriarchs. And Paul says in Romans 9, 1-5, that his heart breaks for his own Jewish people to know the Lord and that the promises still remain to them. So yes, Jewish leaders gave Jesus over to the Romans to be crucified, and they were held responsible for that by God. The Jewish nation ultimately was held responsible for rejecting Jesus, and the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed as an act of divine judgment. And the Jewish people have been scattered around the world because, yes, as a people, ultimately, we did not believe the witness of the Jewish apostles. But the fact is, all the first followers of Jesus were Jews. If you want to say the Jews killed Christ, then you also say the Jews followed Christ, and Jesus himself is a Jew. And not only so, but when you get to the book of Acts, you read that there are tens of thousands of Jews who are following Jesus and believing that he's the Messiah. So again, all I'm doing is rightly understanding the text. And many scholars will tell you that when the word Jew is used in the New Testament, it can refer to a Jewish religious leader. It can refer to a Judean, simply someone who leads in Judea, or it can refer to the Jewish people as a whole. And that's why you need to translate and do academic work properly. When I raised this to Dr. Jones, E. Michael Jones, on my show, he mocked it and said, look, maybe he's a little skeptical about scholarship because he was kicked out of a university for his moral stand years ago. So he's a little skeptical of scholarship. Well, that's a little dangerous to quote and footnote books and quote scholars. And then when a scholarly opinion against yours is brought forth, you reject it. So bottom line, the word of God says that God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only son. So Jesus died because God gave him for us. It's number one. Number two, it's our sins that put him to death. He died for our sins.
Good point.
Number three, he said, I lay down my life of my own accord. And number four, he prays forgiveness, as you mentioned, for those crucifying him. And when Peter preaches in Acts 3, he says to the Jewish leaders, You put him to death, but you did it in ignorance. So repent.
Right,
So the
right. Well, isn't that what it's all about, is repenting? And that's why he took on all of our sins in the first place.
Exactly.
If you don't get the bigger picture, go watch Passion of the Christ. That lays it out pretty well, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, bottom line is when you make a generalization about the people, the Jews killed Christ. Well,
Right.
do you mean Peter, John? No, not those Jews. Well, what about the Jews that were hailing him as Messiah? What about the end of Matthew 21, where it says that the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders were afraid to arrest him because the Jewish crowds, thought he was a prophet. So which Jews are you talking about?
Well said.
And all I'm saying is being nuanced, because
Right.
through history, this has led to bloodshed against Jewish people.
Now,
being nuanced and accurate, and we can all agree.
Yeah, study things, get specific, and and focus on facts, not sweeping generalizations. James says Jews own nearly every slave ship and the lion's share of slaves. He knows it. We've already discussed that. Also, it's the Islamic.
But by the way, listen, I would admit this is true, except the Mossad and the Council of National Policy and all the other things that I'm a secret member of, they won't allow me to tell the truth about the slave trade.
Be careful. Somebody will edit that and take it out of context. Be careful, even though you're saying it with a grin on your face.
Yeah, with a little sarcasm there.
Right. Now, here's the thing. The Torah, the Old Testament, and the Talmud are clearly against slavery. And if you want to find out about slavery, read the Islamic texts. And here's another thing. Why did Thomas Jefferson found the U.S. Marine Corps? And I'll clue you folks into this. He founded the U.S. Marine Corps because the Islamic ships kept attacking American ships and enslaving our sailors and holding them for ransom. So the very guy who didn't want a standing army ended up creating the U.S. Marine Corps because Islamic ships kept taking American slaves, sailors' slaves, and holding our sailors for ransom. So, there's a bit of history for you, but, go through and read the Torah, read the Talmud, because the Talmud, most of what I've read, is clearly against slavery, and there are some sections in there. If you take a slave woman, you have to have her for 3 months or whatever before you can marry her. And if she's younger, I forget the age limit. If she's under 16 or whatever, you have to set her free. I forget what they say, whereas Islam does not say anything like that. And I'll have to get back to the exact quotes on that later on. But
there's a friendly debate I did with Old Testament Semitic scholar Josh Bowen about the Bible and slavery. Within the Old Testament system, there were laws for slavery, but this was, for the most part, an indentured servanthood. For the most part, this was something, for example, the Hebrew slave, he'd go free in the 7th year. If he was mistreated, he'd have to be freed immediately. This was common in the ancient world, but Israel was a nation of redeemed slaves. And for example, on the Sabbath, everybody rested. God judged the nation when they mistreated slaves. There was no notion that what we've seen, the African slave trade, where people being kidnapped and sold into slavery in one nation and bought by another, that was abhorrent. In fact, in the 10 Commandments, lo tignov, do not steal, was understood by traditional Judaism to include kidnapping, because that would be stealing a person. So there'd be a fundamental law against that. And I did post a link that sets the record straight about Jews and slavery as well. The thing that's wild, though, Jan, is that you and I can be misinformed about something. We're human beings, right? Or we can have done research and not done it thoroughly enough and come to wrong conclusions. But when we get up and share what we do, we're doing it as carefully and accurately as possible. And generally speaking, if we're not sure of a position, we'll say, I need to research more. The thing that tells you how wrong the others are is when they speak a lie, you deny the lie, and they say, what I'm saying is true.
Oh, yeah. And then you're a Mossad agent, Zionist, CIA, sellout, FBI agent, yada, yada, and they'll spread so much ad hominem, so many ad hominem lies to make sure that they try to cover every single possible base out there, rather than just saying, you know what, I'm wrong. Maybe I should do a little more research on this. So they name call us for their own intellectual shortcomings.
Yeah, even if we just say, okay, we have a disagreement here, fine. But when someone posts what they post, as crazy as it is, I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I think, okay, actually, they believe that. Yet when we speak the truth and refute the lie, they say, you know, you're lying and not telling the truth. So that's the concerning thing. And I see someone posting over and over, the Jews killed Christ. That's the Jews. So that means all the Jews. That means Peter. Why not say all humanity? You want an accurate statement?
This person FX2Pi, Josh, yes, but the Jews delivered Christ up to be crucified by the Romans. But notice how after we just discussed this, the Jews. See, so you have to use, okay, so there was a couple few hundred Jews there, but they use as sweeping a generalization fallacy as they possibly can to include all of Judaism, as if all Jews were at this event and they all simultaneously delivered them up. You already addressed it, that it was specific Jewish leaders, and they did it fearfully at the same time. So, this whomever is hiding behind this FX2PY account clearly lacks, critical thinking and honesty,
But how about this here? IHS. This is a good thing, though, because the junk is coming to the surface. The definition of Jew is to sin. So I'm really pleased to see this, right? The definition of Jew is to sin, because this is the perfect example of the irrationality of anti-Semitism. And the moment you expose it, the anti-Semites come out of the woodwork. And by the way, Vinny says modern Jews reject Christ. Yes, each generation is responsible. In other words, the majority of the Jewish people through the ages have rejected Jesus as the Messiah. So those people are responsible for that. And because of that, I believe they are lost and cannot be redeemed. I believe that. It's a hard thing to say, but I believe it. But that does not mean that they were there or responsible for the crucifixion. See, when I was a brand new believer and this rabbi gave me the book about the history of anti-Semitism in the church, and I saw how Jews were literally burned at the stake for killing God. They were accused of deicide. The Jews are Christ killers. Therefore, my Jewish neighbor that I happen to owe some money to, it'd be convenient to get rid of him, that if he won't be baptized, he should be put to death. This is the type of garbage that has been spewed through the centuries. And what's remarkable is I don't see any of the anti-Semites here saying, yeah, we agree with Paul in Romans 11:26 that at the end of the age, Israel will be saved. And we agree with Paul that the Jewish people, because of the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are still loved by God. And we agree with Jesus that salvation is from the Jews. I wonder why they're so selective. It reminds me of the Nazis who put out their own edition of the New Testament and literally removed all the passages that spoke well about Israel and the Jewish people because it was against their theology.
Aquila says, so any criticism of Jews is anti-Semitic. Didn't we just cover that over the last hour and a half? It's like, good grief.
That's where we started. Here.
Oh, man. Didn't we criticize Israel and criticize Jews who've done bad and say be specific, and rather than using the Jews and sweeping generalizations? And, a lot of this stuff is like the Sabbatean Jews who are crypto-Islamists doing a lot of bad stuff, or atheists who do a lot of bad stuff. And then because of their last name, the Jews get the blame. But people don't have the wherewithal to be specific about it.
Just to look at this, I posted the article I talked about right at the beginning of the show. It is not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel fairly. I could say that 1,000 times a day, and when I'm done, someone says, oh, so you can't criticize the Jews? And not only so, here, IHS, repeating, thank you, whoever you are, IHS, thank you. It's okay for a Jew to steal from the Goyim. So here we have it, Jan.
So, here. Didn't I already show that quote on screen? Isn't that from the Talmud number 7? Let me show that again here, because I've already shown it, because, people actually just regurgitate dumb stuff, a lost object, but let me see if I can find that. Here, hold on a second. Well, it's going to take me a little bit longer to find that one.
But here, you went through all the time, effort to research and write it out.
Right, and I did the actual research through the actual Talmud, and if people disagree, anybody who disagrees it's like they don't understand that, we're actually doing the research. It's not about disagreeing. A contradiction is always a lie or an error. Did you actually go through and fact check this stuff? And I actually have spent many, many, many hours going through, see, here's the one of the false ones, Sanhedrin 57a. A Jew need not pay a Gentile or Cuthian wages owed to him for work. And so here's the entire breakdown. We can see where the quotes come from, and then we read down and we can see the conclusions of this, and how all of this is false. But what they do is they take these stupid fake Talmud quotes out of context and then think that they're actually repeating facts, that they never fact checked. They've never cracked a book in their life, probably not at least since elementary school. And they think that, they're actually telling some truth that we're trying to hide. And you and I are Zionist, Mossad agent sellouts because we actually fact checked the actual books and documentation. I mean, every single paragraph here, folks, is linked to the actual Talmud so that we can go in and read what it says in the Talmud. Every single line, folks.
And just to explain this, and again, for those who don't know me, my PhDs in Semitic languages, Near Eastern languages and literatures from New York University. These are fields I have lived in and published in academic journals, etc. But when you go to the links you have there to sfaria.org, which is a massive compendium for free of Jewish literature online, traditional literature, when you get to the Talmudic text, when you look at them in English, you'll see some of the print is in bold and some is it in regular caps. This is the expanded translation of Rabbi Adin Steinschaltz. And the text that's in black, bold, that's the actual words of the Talmud in Hebrew or Aramaic, but it's so concisely expressed that when you translate it into English, you need to expand it. That's what he does there. So you're getting a translation with commentary from an Orthodox rabbi. But the thing, as I sit and watch and just see people spouting things, the FX to 2pi person, you're only allowed to say the Jews when you praise them, but not when you criticize them. That's one of the lies that gets repeated all the time. And that I even deal with it in the article that I printed today, trying once again to deal with the lies. Someone said, well, what can you say about the Jews? Well, anything that's truthful. But if I say the Jews in America, there are roughly, whatever it is, 5.5 million. The Jewish population in America is roughly 5 million, whatever it is, okay? That's an accurate statement. If I say the Jews are Democrats, no, the vast majority are Democrats, but there are many Jewish Republicans. The Jews are liberals. Well, many are, but you've got the Dennis Pragers and Ben Shapiro's and David Horowitz's, et cetera. So it's the Jews are really smart. Well, many are, but
not
many
all.
aren't.
Yeah. Well, and this FX2Pi person, he says that I made up about him saying the Jews. So what I'm doing is I'm quoting him saying it. So
yeah.
There you go. You lied, not me. So good job.
Well, the good thing is, as we've gone, I see now a few minutes past our 90 minutes. But the good thing is we started to interact with the chat. All it is everyone just came out and performed on cue. The people repeated the standard lies. Then when we refute the lies, then they have to attack us personally and manufacture all kinds of nonsense. And look,
Satan is the father of all lies.
Yeah, I'm in dialogue day and night with people I differ with, including Muslims. Not as much with Muslims, but I'm in dialogue with a Catholic yesterday, and we were sharing our differences between Catholic and evangelical. I'm in constant interaction with Orthodox rabbis about Jesus. We're going back and forth and arguing and debating. I interact with atheists and others. We have our differences. And I was fine to have my differences with E. Michael Jones on my show. People can watch the whole interview. They'll see it was fair. And I didn't even try to debate. We just had civil dialogue. I'm fine to do it, but let it be based on facts and information. And then if we have our differences, fine. Don't let it be based on myths and fables and lies. And remember, to the Jewish community, the religious Jewish community, the ultra-Orthodox community, I have been called public enemy number one because of doing effective outreach to my Jewish people about Jesus being the Savior and the Lord. So I am the last one that the Jewish community wants defending them or defending the Talmud. Like, I've got a 300-page book explaining why I don't accept the authority of the Talmud. But anyway, we've had some interesting interaction. I'd love to get you on my show. We'll continue some of the.
Yeah, you know, and I'm going to have you back. This is big. I had a lot of fun doing this show with you, so let's do that. You know, and I'd be happy to go on your show as well. But I'm going to have to get this Talmud document finished. That's going to cause a huge uproar when I publish that thing, you know.
I'm sure it will. But God bless you for taking the time to do it. And I still want to finish going through it with any comments I have. But again, when I saw Lloyd's comments in the YouTube chat, I thought, oh, a breath of fresh air. Someone actually studied it and learned it and understand where it's coming from. And then on controversial passages, I didn't just rely on studying it myself because Talmud's very complex. I sent things to rabbi friends and said, how would you respond to this? What's your take on this? And of course, they're all appalled and shocked by the view that the Talmud sanctions pedophilia or whatever. So here, as I'm trying to win them over to Jesus, we're exposing the lies about the Talmud. But anyway, listen, can you get me a copy of my membership card to the CNP? Because I need to add that to my Mossad card.
Apparently, I got it in the mail, but I never got my copy. So I don't know. I didn't even know what it was until they posted it. So
same here. Well, look, we did a great job of tricking everyone tonight to think that we really.
You got to be careful being sarcastic like that, because some of these people don't have the wherewithal to know you're joking. You know.
I understand. Sometimes it's hard to resist, but you're right. That's a word of wisdom there. All right.
And everybody, just please be aware that my channel was demonetized, along with so many other Christian conservative shows. Please donate, support the show. I've put the links up in the chat. Please go to Patreon. Please subscribe to the channel as well, and hit the alerts button there. But again, please support the show. We can't do it without you. We'll see if we can get the show remonetized soon. But they put me on a month timeout. Who knows if they'll allow it to be monetized again? They don't. They don't. Yeah. Allow or like Christian and conservative shows being monetized anymore. It's it's a
challenge. Hey, can I just give a quick invite? My show airs on the Ask Dr. Brown channel, ASKDR Brown. Tomorrow, July 4th, we're on 3 to 4 in the afternoon live. But to all those that attacked my position tonight, to the anti-Semites who were there, please call. Give me a call. We have open lines. We take phone calls.
That sounds fun.
Present your evidence.
They can't.
Do it.
They only have a list of talking points. It's like a laundry list, and the neo-Nazis, the GDL, and the Islamic apologists all use the exact talking points over and over and over, and none of them have ever fact-checked any of it.
No. Well, anyway, truth will triumph in the end. 2 Corinthians 13:8, Paul said we can do nothing against the truth, but only for the truth. So I feel bad for those on the other side, because truth is going to ultimately triumph.
Well said. All right, Dr. Michael Brown, great show tonight. I really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to do this again. Let me know when you want me on your show. I'd be happy to do it. It's been a real pleasure having you on. Good night, everybody. Sir. Please support the show. Need all the support we can get. Please see Patreon. Go to the logosmedia.com website, or happy to accept your Bitcoin donations as well. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night.